Good afternoon. I'm Brock Johnston. I'm Public Relations Manager here with the Iowa Soybean Association. Thank you all for joining us again today as appreciated members of ISA. The Iowa Soybean Association, of course, is driven to deliver those insights, tools, activities, and information that improve the competitiveness and that profitability of Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. Today's webinar on developing more effective crop management systems is part of ISA's Innovation to Go series, and which of course is led by staff here at our Research Center for Farming Innovation, taking place monthly through September. So today on this webinar, we're joined by Scott Nelson. He's a Senior Field Services Program Manager with the RCFI. Just a few quick housekeeping notes here before we begin. Today's webinar is designed to be very interactive. So following Scott's presentation, he'll be available to answer your questions here in real time. And then if you have any questions throughout the presentation, share them using that Q&A feature that you can see at the bottom of your screen. We'll be collecting those throughout, and we'll have Scott answer those during our Q&A portion to follow his presentation. So with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Scott to get started today. So thanks for joining, Scott.
All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. I really appreciate your time. I've been an agronomist 31 years now in Iowa, research agronomist. And this project is something that I'm really excited about. It's the use of production data, and I'm going to show you to increase your profitability. And I'm going to show you about the project. And then when I get done, I'm going to talk a little bit about some crop situations with soybeans, and then we can answer questions. So my big moniker here is help us to help you before it gets worse. And you know, we're sitting at good high commodity prices, but one thing I can promise is those won't last. And so we got to continually work on our inputs and getting the most value out of our farming operations. And so I'm going to talk to you about a project where we think we can get at some of those questions. And just to start with, in the right hands, your production data can be golden. But in the wrong hands, your production data can be dangerous. And I'm going to give you a little example of why that might be. So here's a field we passed across my desk a couple of years ago, and I think it's very interesting. The farmer split a field, and it was a very uniform looking field, and split it in half like most farmers do, or a lot of farmers do. And variety A yielded 64 bushels, and variety B yielded 57 bushels. So you would think, gosh, there's a 7 bushel advantage for variety A. Maybe I need to put that on all my farms. Well, when you delve into the data, even though this field looked uniform, look at the soil maps. And I simplified the soil maps in this example a little bit for you. I have high, moderate, and poorly productive soils. And you can notice that now you see a trend. Well, did variety A really win over variety B because of the soil situation? Well, let's look at what I call an equal soils comparison. And so I have variety A and variety B here, and on the high yielding portion of the field, actually variety B won. And in the moderate area, actually variety B won. But there was about 30 acres of very poor soil in this side of the field. You didn't really notice it, but it was there. That wasn't under variety A, and that part yielded 35 bushels. So that drove down the yield average to 57. So we're left with the question, variety B could very well have been the best variety for your farm. But if you just looked at a whole field comparison, you would have said variety A. And so that's why I say production data can be very valuable in the right hands. And so what we're doing in this project is we're trying to capture more farmer production data to help them make better decisions on their soils and in their production and with their inputs. This could have been a management practice or something else that somebody had done, tillage or anything that they would have compared. They would have seen the same kind of a difference there. You know, imagine a fungicide versus a no fungicide. Do you really know the difference if you're not looking at the equal soils? So with that said, the big idea here is your production data is very important, but we need to combine many fields and replications, and we need intense data and appropriate data mining. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit here. So in modern computing, now we have supercomputers and they provide us a step change possibilities for Iowa farmers. So like I say, we can do equal soils analysis if we have the data. We can do what we call crop modeling. And what that is that's taking management information and simulating different weather programs and seeing how stable weather. We model the crop response data in from your management data, and we simulate what would happen in a dry year or a wet year with crop modeling. And it's become a very powerful tool that we can understand and gain insight into which management practices are the most stable and the most profitable for your areas. The other thing we can do is what I call hotspot analysis, or this is where key soybean stresses occur in the state. And I wish we would have had this data back when we were struggling with dicamba. Maybe we still struggle a little bit with drift and volatility losses, but this would have helped us understand better, where we are having problems with dicamba drift and all that, if we could have done a hotspot analysis of that based on scouting data. And I'm going to go over a little bit more of that here in a minute. So this project is funded by, or it's organized by the NCSRP. That's the North Central Soybean Research Program. And that is an investment of your checkoff dollars. And the purpose of this program is to use farmer data to identify and communicate best practices for soybean profitability at a regional level and also at a local level. And let me say that what we're trying to do is take your production data and develop new insight into practices that could improve your profitability. And the big focus this year is on economics, return on investment. What is a return on investment for phosphorus in soybeans or potassium? Different herbicide types, sonic versus something else, And we're trying to develop some economic simulations that'll help you make wiser decisions with your input costs. And I'm going to show you in a minute here what the deliverable will be. It'll be an interactive website on best soybean practices at a county or a local level. The other component of this project is a stress inventory, and where we've got crop scouts collecting and giving us data on what's happening in the field, where there's soybean aphids, where there's herbicide drift, where there's nutrient deficiencies, all sorts of things, where gall midge is. We really need to understand where gall midge is. We think it's in the western third of the state, but we want to monitor if it's coming east. So what we're going to deliver to you is a spatial inventory of key crop stresses from all across the state in this project. So this is kind of a mock-up of what the final deliverable on this project will be. You could go into Iowa and just draw a little circle around your area of the state. I'm picking Northwest Iowa, and upload, and from that circle, a data table would be downloaded that would give you, these are the practices that were the most profitable for soybeans, varieties, was it phosphorus, potassium, tillage, no tillage, row spacings, plant populations, and other things that farmers try and do in their production. And that will give you new insight and ideas as you build your crop plans and you think about your input costs. So that's the big deliverable there. I want to take a minute and just talk about, we've done this before, and in past work, we surveyed farmers from 2015 to 2017. And what we kind of got, the insight we got from that previous survey is that there was a large yield response for later maturing soybeans planted in the normal corn planting window. And it was a very interesting insight that kind of floated out to the top of the data that we have. You may disagree with this a little bit, but I want to show you the data and see how we came to that conclusion. So this is the number of fields we did in our past survey. We surveyed farmers about their planting days and production practices and all those things. And you can see we had like 8,000 fields in our survey. And what we came up with is, in our data, we began to see, this is on the bottom, this is days for after April 1st. and then this is yield. And you can see that what they did is they broke it out into what we call technology extrapolation zones. And what those are is areas where that have common soils and common weather. And so like 4R would be over here. And you can see from our data, we saw, wow, there's a pretty good yield drop off as you plant later soybeans in Iowa, in northern Iowa. Even in southern Iowa, we saw the same thing. Also included with that was the varieties. And we saw a trend where later maturing hybrids planted earlier gave us a yield advantage. So what we did with that new insight is we validated that with some strip trials, and I'll show you the results of that. So this is where all the strip trials were located. Notice Iowa did most of the work, which is usual. And but this is where we did the work. And I'm just showing you an average overall locations of this work. And let me set it up a little bit. So the first comparison was a normal relative maturity soybean planted at a later planting date. This would be like business as usual, and the average was 63 bushels an acre. We planted that same normal RM under an early planting date, and we saw, about a 2.5 bushel yield advantage for the normal RM planted earlier. But look at the large advantage there was for a later maturing soybean. And when I say later, I'm saying 0.3 to 0.5 or so later than your normal RM. So if you normally grow a 2.5 in these trials, they would plant a 2.8 as a later RM. And you can see that large 7 bushel yield advantage for late beans early. Now, I know I've shown this data to a number of farmers that I really respect, and they say, Scott, it doesn't work that way, because my risk of frost and with these later RMs, and I want to get my soybeans out so I get to my corn. And that's all good, but I think this data is very important because it can enter into your calculus of the cost benefit of which varieties do I place on that field, because planting a later RM earlier really doesn't cost you that much. And there's a huge yield response potential. Maybe you don't do it on all your fields, but you would do it on some. Now, some farmers told me, Scott, you got it all wrong. You need, and farmers do that a lot. They tell me, oh, I got it all wrong. But they said, what you need to do is plant an earlier RM and plant that earlier, and you get more of a yield advantage. That data didn't show up in our previous survey, but we're looking for that data in this coming survey to see if we can pick that out. And we're actually going to address that with some strip trials this year. So this is just, this is all the 34 locations, all years that we did the late beans early. And you can see we didn't win every time. We lost in a few areas in Southeast Iowa primarily. But look at the large yield advantages we saw, up to 15, 20 bushel advantages for later RM planted earlier. So that's just an example of how we used farmer data, how we developed insight from your survey data and applied that to our production and to develop new systems. You may not agree with it, you may not want to farm that way, but it does give you an interesting insight about what you can do with your farms. So in this new farmer survey, we're asking you to spend 20 to 30 minutes to give us anonymous web survey completed by the farm crop, by you or your crop advisor. This requires yield data, location, management practices, etc. I'm showing you a website here that you can go to. Don't bother writing it down. It'll be at iasoybeans.com. You can see that. And you can enter data from 2021 now, or you can and we would request that you add data from 2022 and 2023, which is the length of the survey. And our goal in Iowa is to try to get 3,000 fields in the system, and that'd be about 1,000 fields a year. And the more data we have, the better we could help you and gain new insight into what's going on in soybean production and how we can raise yield levels and profitability. And I'll be honest with you, as a research agronomist, I'm kind of frustrated, in ideas on how we can get soybeans to a higher level. I know a farmer, he does everything right. He's built his soil tests up and plants the right populations. I think he's planting the right varieties, and he's getting 55 bushels. And And we need to be up to 65, 75 in this state. And I'm just looking forward to looking at your production data, and then we can figure out ways that we can break that 55, 60 bushel yield barrier that we seem to have in a lot of parts of the state. Now, I'll warn you, sorry, this survey is a bit difficult. We have a lot of scientists involved with this, and they need a lot of information. Us agronomists kind of got with them and settled them down a little bit and reduced some of the questions that they had to make sure, do you really need that data or do you not? So it's a little bit difficult. Like I say, it still only take you 20 to 30 minutes. Enter what data you have, skip what you don't have. And like I say, help us to help you before it gets worse. Here's an example of the survey. The first thing up is we asked for a cooperator or farmer name. That's just so we can have a record. We need to identify the record in the data set. If you use an alias, that's just as fine. Just remember the alias that you use, because this survey, you can fill out half of it and come back later and put in the rest. But you'll need to remember your name that you use to go back and add to the survey. The other thing is we really would like to have spatial yield monitor data, and that's kind of important. But if you only have the option, but we do leave you an option where you can add field averages. But when we have yield monitor data, we can do equal soils analysis and drill in deeper to what's going on in some of your farms and fields. And it involves zipping up your yield information, and you can contact me at the end, and I can help you with knowing how to zip that up, or talk to your crop consultant or your seed dealer or somebody that works with your spatial data, and they can do that for you too. So it's a series of questions we ask, and some of them may seem dumb to you, but we've really been very carefully thought through these, and we kind of need this data to sort out what's going on in some of these fields. And just here's some more of the fields. This is a survey. This is what our scouts are going to be doing, and they're going to be rating lodging, excess rain, drought, frost. But this is part of that intensive scouting. And I'm just showing you this. The farmer probably won't have much involvement in this, but our crop scouts are going to be following this type of data. So like I say, we're collecting scouting data for 100 fields every 2 to 3 weeks, just to develop that heat map or that hotspot analysis to kind of inventory and survey where the pest stresses are the greatest in Iowa. And then when we develop an inventory of those, we can figure out, are these diseases or insects moving, or are they staying in the same place? And that's going to be really important to be proactive in your management. And those of you that hire scouts for your data, like I say, we're doing 100 fields, but if your crop consultant is willing to provide that scouting data, send that on into us, and I'll give you a contact for it. We could use your scouting data to enhance our 100 field survey. So like I say, help us to help you and fill out the survey with as many fields as you can. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit and talk about a field situation we have in Iowa, and that's with white mold. White mold is a very important disease in this state, and for some reason it occurred in places in the state where it wasn't supposed to last year. We had it clear down in southwest Iowa, which we think of it as mostly a disease of the northeastern Iowa, where you have cool and cooler weather and more humidity. But we found it in many places in the state where it shouldn't be, and we need to be alert on this. And the one thing I want you to do now that you can be alert at is look for these mushrooms in your field. Starting now or more so as you get closer to canopy, look for these mushrooms. And if you see a lot of mushrooms in these fields, then you need to get help, because we need to apply a fungicide or we need to figure out new management practices for that field. Darren Mueller at Iowa State University is very expert in this, or you can contact me at this location here as well. You can contact me, and we'd be very interested to see, if you're seeing white mold in this state. With that, I'm going to stop right now, Brock, and if there's any questions or comments, then I'll be happy to address them.
Yeah, we can pull up a few here. Looks like we had a few come in from our audience members. We'll go down the list here. So it looks like one of the first questions that we had come in here was about early planting dates and leading to that higher yield. Scott, what are you hoping to find out just generally? I know you touched on some of those points, but high level, maybe some of those things you're hoping to find out with this new survey.
Well, we believe that there's quite a yield advantage for later RM planted earlier in the corn planting window, mid-April or so. But in the years that we validated that data, they were kind of dry summers, and we had September rains. And so that favored the later RMs over the earlier ones. And that could be why we saw the response, even though the trials were over 3 years. We're looking for more data to understand, in a year where it's not so dry in the summer, maybe there's less of a yield advantage for that later RM. We certainly believe, and it's been pretty validated, that planting in the corn planting window of soybeans gives you a yield advantage. But what we're not understanding well is the interaction with different variety maturity, and that's one of the big things we want to learn.
And then moving into just kind of how this specific project may be different from what a farmer's local retailer, what they're already doing. Can you maybe point out some of those differences as well?
Well, yeah, this project has some really high level data analysts and people that are just skilled in how to manipulate large scale data. And these guys can do things like equal soil analysis, and they can do different things with the data that would be different. A local co-op may or may not be equipped to do some of the analysis that we can do through this project.
Great. All right, and then we'll just move on to that other question we've got here. And this kind of goes back to that data you were mentioning. So as far as, keeping that anonymous, you had mentioned that you can use whatever name you'd like. You just have to remember your credentials to go back in and complete the survey. But are there any other ways that you can kind of walk through about how farmer data maybe is kept anonymous in this specific survey?
Well, your data privacy is very, very important to us, and we have a policy that's very strict about releasing spatial data outside of our organization, and so that data is kept very confidential.
And then we'll hop on this last question here. We have this.
Oh, we're free from Freedom of Information Act requests too, so
yeah.
you don't have to worry about that. So.
And then we had this other question come in from an attendee. So they had asked, does the survey ask cover crop and manure management in that info that farmers have to fill out?
Yes, we requested data. If I don't think many guys put manure on their soybeans. I know some do, but we'd like to know if you have a history of that in your production, because we kind of know, but we don't really know how much of that manure from the corn carries over into the soybeans, and that's really important for us to understand that. And cover crops are very important to understand. When you terminated it, how you terminated it, and maybe we can build trends, with time of termination. We've struggled gathering enough data on time of termination in strip trials, but maybe with this data we can collect more data and understand the right termination time and size of the cover crop to improve profitability.
Right. All right, I'm trying to see if we had any other questions that came in here. We've got one more here. I'll pull that one up. Okay. And then as far as a deliverable for when the survey info would be released, so that map that maybe shows the best practices for a farmer's certain area, can you talk a little bit more maybe about, when that would be released or what that would look like for them?
Yeah, it'll be yearly summaries. But the final one, those will be kind of, what do I say? They'll be edited and adjusted as we learn more.
Awesome. Okay, I think that clears our queue of questions as of now. I'll hand it back over to you. Did you have more other slides, Scott, you wanted to hop into?
No, I just wanted to say thank you again for your time today. And this is like I say, I've been research agronomist for a long time, and this is something that really excites me as we can develop new insight into soybean production and ways that we can make you more profitable.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you taking the time to
Oh, here's
chat
my
with
contact information
Okay.
again, if anybody wants it.
Awesome. Okay, sweet. Okay, yeah, if anyone has any other following questions, feel free to use that Q&A feature here as we wrap up for today. Just go ahead and drop them in that chat and we'll try and answer them here before we hop off. But obviously, thank you again, Scott, for joining us today and sharing those insights with us. So, to our audience, we've also trust that you found today's webinar beneficial as you keep making those decisions for your operation this year. Just a reminder, today's discussion is only the fourth in an ongoing series of Innovation to Go webinars, and those are taking place each month through September. So we've got a few more to knock out here, and those are all hosted by our ISA researchers. So that next webinar will take place on Tuesday, July 13th, and that focuses on methods and trade-offs of relay cropping in Iowa. So you can register for that opportunity and more here on our website at iasoybeans.com. If you're interested in participating in research trials or projects with the RCFI team as well, please complete that trial interest form that you can find on our website as well. So on behalf of the Iowa Soybean Association, thank you for your participation today, and we'll see you at the next one. Thank you very much.